Hello, and thank you so much for joining this episode of the Enneagram and Marriage podcast. This is an E&M mini. We are talking about finding and aligning your values in marriage. Guys, I want you to be rooted in what is most healthy when you're making decisions, when you're asking yourself, how can I live authentically, but also show care to others? So today, this episode is just for you to help you to do that. And I'm doing it right here with you. I'm going to share once again a little bit about my values. I'm also going to share some of the most common values today. And I'm pulling this out of not only our Deeper Dive Values series, but also just out of the ongoing week by week conversations that I have with my couples. As it turns out, we all have, as you know, with the Enneagram, different gifts, but within any personality system or any spiritual gifts assessment, we have a lot of different parts, right? We have so many pieces of us. And if you're on our deep dive series now, you know we talk about parts, internal family systems. But the truth is, we really do all have varied gifts and things that are super important to us. And so we're going to walk through that in a little bit more detail today, even though it's a shorter episode. And we're also going to bring you on that journey so that you can align your values with your spouse or partner. Because I know that as you're trying to figure out your marriage, or maybe you hope to get married one day, it's so important to realize you don't have to be exactly the same to show love, but there are foundations that you do both need. So we'll talk about that. And I hope you're well overall. The E&M announcements for today are to make sure that you're getting your self-pres so that you are refreshing and getting your basic window of tolerance relationally with your sleep, your fitness, your emotional work that we're talking a lot about on Mondays, and also making sure that you are taking that spiritual time if you're a person of faith as well. So we look at things here as a psychosocial spiritual lens and also the biology. So you can even add bio to the front of that as well. But the truth is, I want you to make sure you know that you are allowed to take that mini assessment with yourself every day and even as a couple every week. So that could look like you just saying every day as I get started, I make sure that I am getting my rest, that I'm allowed to in this crazy culture that's so busy. I'm also allowed to look at, and it's healthy to look at our one to one and how are we doing together and how are we experiencing one another and how can we draw closer to each other. And it's also helpful to say, now, how can we give from that space? And how can we enjoy social? Social is going to have parts of you that are both helping and serving, as well as parts of you that are both just receiving. So just know that each of these instincts has pieces like that so that you're not just all about you, but that you're actively also giving out. That's so important. Love others as you love yourselves. And from that space, we can talk a little bit about values. And I actually have mine written in the back of my book here. I'm going through this book with Jack right now, The Modern Age, Victoria's Empire to the End of the USSR. And it is a really good book by Susan Weisbauer. Some of you may know her well-trained mind, but I wrote my values again in the back of this book. I also wrote them in my phone so that I can take time. I just have the ones in my phone where I always refine. But I thought, for you, as I'm asking you to do this exercise, I thought, let me do mine with you so that you can take some time to discover your rooted values just like I do. And you might even grab while you're listening to this podcast your phone, or you might grab a scratch sheet of paper. If you're anything like most people, you need something sort of to work with, some tool to get your brain moving. And of course, there's those few of you who are just amazing at accuracy, even without any tool in front of you. That's fine too. But either way, take a deep breath as we enter this part of the episode where we get to really look at your values. So, the big picture, like I said, before we narrow down, is that we all share some things. I've already hinted at one of them, and that is loving others as you love yourself. But what we have to also remember is that each person, despite these different gifts, has value. And that is something that I was just reminded of so much from one of my favorite movies today. Of course, I get that in my scriptures as well when I'm reading the Bible, but I love the movie Gettysburg. And I have to say this, I'm so excited that my son loved it too, you guys. And that was so big for me because you may remember me from previous podcasts saying, gosh, my dad loved that and all these epic war dramas growing up. And then I realized later when I was teaching literature for a while, gosh, I love them too. And so I passed them on to some of the kids from class. One of the boys that I taught in the past even tried to sort of pick up Hannah with a Last of the Mohicans not long ago. And she's like, that's my mom. Don't even try it on me. But I was like, girls, like, I'm so disappointed that you aren't picking up on, this epic saga stuff, which maybe later, right? But anyway, Jack, we were reading this book right here that I was referencing, and he was really noticing with me that the part on the Civil War was only like 1 or 2 paragraphs because there's honestly so many wars in this modern age that Susan Wise Bauer had to be more succinct. Um, so sad, right? So she ends up going into detail about, the most important aspects, but she misses so much. So I was like, Jack, do you want to do Gettysburg? All and that, he does love it too, like I said. But in the one of the most beautiful parts of this saga, you might remember Jeff Daniels plays the captain of the 20th Maine. I probably said captain wrong. I can't remember exactly his title, lieutenant, general. Anyway, he is playing the wonderful professor from Maine, rhetoric professor. And I've done deep dives on this before, but not right now. So the beautiful line that just really touched my soul was when Jeff Daniels says that all of us have value, when he talks about why he's fighting the war. And so many people didn't know why they were fighting. It was getting very murky. General Longstreet doesn't know why he's fighting anymore. People are forgetting, or people have values that really don't touch down and don't get deeply rooted like we're doing here today. And it just resonated so deeply with my soul when he said, everyone has value. And this is one of those rare wars that we fight for the other person to have value. And I was just so touched by that. And just also, like I said, so grateful that Jack loved it because the girls never did. Some of my previous students did. And, that was just a joy that he is now in this space to enjoy this with me. So we had a blast. I had tears streaming down during the bayonet scene. Some of you probably love that, an epic soundtrack as well. But just the joy of seeing my son enjoy it with me and learn these great virtues. This is part of my values. So you may be thinking of some of your favorite movies, and that's actually great because that's my first assignment for you is when you're trying to think about your values, what movies do you love? That is a really good indication of some of them are just gonna be like, oh my gosh, this one's so funny. But honestly, one of your core values might be, I really love humor. And so that's been one of the most basic tenets that has gotten me through some really hard times. So you may also say, oh my gosh, it's just a rom com. I love when they fall in love. Well, maybe one of your deepest values is nurturing that sexual instinct. So take some time to write down, or like I said, in your section of your phone notes or something, where you really allow yourself to look at your favorite movies and think about what really comes from them that you love. And of course, I'm a book lover here. Many of you are as well. It might be books that you go to. I definitely looked at both while I was trying to come up with my list for you right here. And before I read from my list, I'll share Brene Brown's, but she a few weeks back, but she has just several lists of top values that she wants everybody to know. Like you can pick from these lists. But for me, I like to do my own and I don't like to look at hers. Nothing against hers. It's just, I'm like, some of mine are quirky, as you're hearing, like me looking at Gettysburg as I think about my values. Like that's how I am. So I also just want to share, like, sometimes there's really, things that are for you that nobody else really likes. So just know that and it's okay. Maybe just take some hints from them, especially for those of you who are just like, hey, wait a minute, what are values again? Because I get that that can be murky too. And I feel like that's, worthy for you to even just hear a few that you might say, gosh, I now get what you're asking me. But really, values are your principles, your standards of behavior, the things that you're holding yourself to, the things that you care deeply about and you don't want to lose sight of. So a few from Brene Brown's list here are knowledge, ethics, fun, spirituality, belonging, peace. And you might have several of those as well, even as I say them, but she has so many others. So please give it a chance as you see the list I'm leaving in the show notes. I will also now share mine that I have really enjoyed thinking about today. And so, like, even if like me, you already knew your values, writing it out again can be really fun. So I thought of my favorite expressions of media to just give me a little bit of a boost in what has attracted me, what have I attached myself to, what do I want to see over and over again, and also spiritually as well. What do I want to make sure I exude? So my values are the sacrifices that I make, and just knowing that I feel like the sacrifices of Christ are gifts I can pour out to others. That's probably why I love The Lord of the Rings, because I really love how Frodo does that so much, where he's working so hard, but he's also sacrificing for a greater cause. And yes, I did get to meet Frodo this past weekend. I'm so excited. I can't even believe it. If you saw my Instagram, I got to meet Elijah Wood and tell him how meaningful that was to me. Probably scared him a little bit, but it was worth it. The love of children is another of my deepest values. You know, I spend a lot of time with my kids investing in them and my nieces and nephews, including today on family text when we're arguing who has the best pet, but also being kind to the others. My pet is not necessarily in the running for that. Humility and yet authority, meaning I love that when people can just be humble about their gifts and grateful and know that everyone has gifts, we all do, but also show the healthy authority when they have become an expert in their gift. And that's how I feel about mine, is I always want to have humility and yet authority. Joy and fun. I love to laugh. I love to have just silly fun and wit with my friends and with my family. I love the depths and seeing those deep, authentic spaces in each other. That makes me very happy. That's probably why I love my work very much, because I get to do that every single day and have those conversations with my kids and try to encourage Wes in those ways, even though I know that can kind of scare him to death. Passion. I love to have enthusiasm. I love to have wisdom, and I highly value those things. And I want to also show compassion for those that are really downtrodden. I think that goes a lot with what I shared about Lord of the Rings, obviously, earlier. But I think lastly, just to kind of echo back all the way to Gettysburg, that I love to make sure that I feel like everyone around me knows they have value, even if we're different. And so be thinking about your values now. I'm going to give you a moment to do that. Take a deep breath. Let yourself just ponder yours, a couple of yours. Maybe you're borrowing some of mine and switching them around. And of course, getting your list. Maybe you're looking at the Brene Brown list. I'm going to give you a moment to take a deep breath, look at that, and then we're going to talk briefly about making sure your values can align with your partner even when they're different. So, okay, go ahead and do that for just a moment. You can also pause me. Okay, good. All right. Well, thank you for taking some time out to really walk through your values. And now I want to just remind you that when you're trying to walk out your values with your spouse or partner, one of the most important things is that they actually know what your values are. Because as you kind of process with me just now, maybe some of you haven't shared those out loud, or you've shared a little bit about your Enneagram type or your Myers Briggs or something, but you haven't really walked down this corridor of sharing it a little more overtly, especially the things that don't exactly fit with your type. Like some of the things I shared were very seven, joy and enthusiasm, but some of them weren't. Um, there's also values I didn't include on the list, like loving mysteries, because we love intrigue and mysteries in our family too. And so there are things that you're now probably grabbing and adding onto yours as well. But I think that it's really important that you also ask yourself, which of these values do I share with my spouse or partner? And if you're writing them down, an easy way to do that is to just look at your list and circle it. And what's so comforting is that although we have many things that are disparate, we also have a lot that are in common. So it's fun to see that, right? It's really cool to see that. And one of the ways I love that about Wes, as I mentioned, mystery, lastly, is that we have our Supper Sleuths Mystery Dinner Game Company. And it's been a joy to follow that through together to say, let's create mysteries that are fun for people to enjoy with us, some of them without us most of the time, actually, because people play them all over the world. And it's just a side business with our friends, but it's a special bond that we all share that links us. And so some of your values you find actually link you together. And that's really cool. And then some of them, you can perhaps underline these, are different, are disparate from your partner. And so I'd love for you to take a moment to also shape those out and to notice whether there are any themes with those that your partner does relate to. So perhaps they're not the same with you about humility. And that's one that you shared with me, but you're like, I don't know. They seem to, really enjoy taking pride in their work. Well, you might say they really sided with that authority side where they're, not necessarily as humble, but they do know how to really show up with healthy pride for the work they do. And I love that about them. And that's also one of my other values. Now, another piece of this might be that they have a value you don't yet have. And this is sort of getting in line with our Enneagram glow theory here that sometimes they bring something you just aren't as good at. Like they're introvert and you're an extrovert and you're learning slowly but surely how to go deep. I noticed that with Wes, where you heard me say I love passion and depth. And, he was obviously drawn to me, even though that he's a very social subtype. And that's a cool subtype. That's somebody who likes to keep it fun, jovial, practical, effective, but not necessarily deep. And so over the years, he's gone really deep. And that's been neat. And over the years, I started very socially with him because we met in that wild high school time. But I think later I really came within and said, I really want my self pres time. And he keeps me balanced in the social way. So I think that you might find that too, that you're realizing, although we don't share all of our values, we've actually really, you could use your Enneagram type here or your instincts, we've really helped each other to go the distance and continue to do that, even though they're very different. And sometimes it's scary almost because they're so different. But be expansive together. I love that word. But the truth is, we all need that every single day. We need to have that. And I almost always think of my dog for this because he's such an obvious example. Again, not winning pet of the year by most of the extended family standards because he's a bit of a grump. But Oreo, if you don't give him his daily walk, it's so obvious that he just gets sort of sad and like within. And I noticed that last night that he was just sad. And I was like, oh, everybody was out late doing different travels and pickups. And he missed his walk. He got a quick taking out, but he missed a chance to be in the world, to be exposed to nature, to have a chance to really live fully. And he was so healthy. As soon as I remembered that, I'm like, let me get his leash on. And he had a wonderful walk and he was just himself again. And I know we're so much, have bigger brains, etc., than animals. He's super small. But the truth is, we're really similar in that way that we also need that balance and expansiveness. So if you don't share all of your values, know that your spouse or partner really does help to shake things up for you. John Gottman would say it like this: we help each other to become less crazy. So I'd love for you to take a deep breath and just note that as we end today, that you are grateful for your spouse and their contributions to making you different, and that you also can set boundaries where you just don't agree, where you say, you know what, they have a value for something I really don't like. We've all had to do that before too. And when you know your core values, you'll be able to understand what's the antidote to that as well. So that if, for instance, you had the value of humility and they had this ugly pride where they were always bragging, you might get a deep conversation with a helper or a professional in that regard. You might say, gosh, I really value sobriety, but yet they are an addict. Another place or space, you might decide to get some help. So it's important that you know that there's these several positions, seeing what you get along with, seeing where you help each other in your disparate values, and then seeing where you may need some boundaries and additional work. So I hope that helped you today. I hope you are on your way closer together as a result of today's mini pod. Thank you so much for doing your work with us. Remember your balance of self pres, sexual, social every single day, and keep up the great work as well as rest. I'll talk to you soon. Bye bye.